I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I do have handouts, okay? When you look at the literature on rural and small town differences from big cities, you see that there's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde reputation that they have with respect to the effectiveness of their law enforcement practices. On the positive side, small town and rural police have been extolled as exemplars of James Q. Wilson's service and watchman styles of policing. And we can look at two sort of studies that sort of along a 25-year continuum of research on rural and small town policing. One was Decker's 1979 study on so-called Pine County, where he wrote that citizens really expected their police to stick their nose into everything. And then in 2005, there was a study by Painberg and Son of a northeastern Pennsylvania town of 2,500 residents, where the law enforcers were preoccupied with dogs, drunks, and citizens' personal dysfunctional relationships. And the citizens did want the police to stick their nose into those relationships. In the opinion of these and other authors, basically, small town and rural police were early practitioners, albeit on an ad hoc basis, of community-oriented policing and problem-oriented policing, but without the follow-up of development of proactive strategies for solving the same problem in the future. Small towns and rural areas have their dark side as well. The literature on sexual assault in rural and small towns paints a picture where victims face greater stigma. There's a greater frequency of sexual assault by intimates and acquaintances that go under-investigated, that law enforcers have lower expertise in investigating sexual assault, longer travel times or forensic examination, community attitudes that favor the offender, and very importantly, the fact that the rural and small town law enforcers are so integrated into the communities, it's hard for them to sort of turn their back on the perpetrator. In other words, the perpetrators could potentially be in their social circles. There's one quantitative study just recently published that shows local law enforcement in a positive light with respect to sexual assault, and that's a study by Alaska State Troopers by Wood, Rose, Kossel, and Tapas, none of whom probably pronounce their names that way. There are 279 sexual assault cases in very, very isolated communities without roads, harsh terrain, and so on. And they found that cases referred from the isolated communities were 2.5 times as likely to be accepted by the prosecutors as sexual assault cases referred elsewhere. So anyway, my paper is an attempt to apply a large national data set on sexual assaults in an examination of police clearance decisions across large city, small town, and rural locations. I use NIBR's data from 2008. The abstract says 2006, 2007, but 2008 came out and it was big enough, so I used them. Dependent variable, depending on the analysis, is either going to be whether or not a case was cleared exceptionally or by arrest, or number of days until clearance. Let me just say this. I include exceptional clearances along with arrests. Some clearance studies just look at arrests, which is a little bit unfair to police. I mean, they identify a suspect in exceptionally clear cases, and it may be that the victim refuses cooperation or the prosecutor declines to prosecute, but nonetheless, the police have, fairly and squarely identified the suspect. So they are included in clearance. The main control variable is the effect of victim-offender relationship on the decision to arrest or number of days to arrest. And if you look in the middle of table 1, you can see my categories for relation to offender. I just want to point out I did put together intimate and ex-intimates. The reason being that both of these share a history of consensual sexual activity that acquaintances, friends don't necessarily share with the victim. So it's a logical combination. Also, if you look at the literature on police acceptance of rape myths, you know, in some circles, rape myths are still accepted, and so there's this yes, yes belief. If a victim said yes even once in the past, clearly she says yes in the future. Independent variables include victim, offender, and incident characteristics. I just want to tell you about a couple of these. I mean, you can see what they are here. Whether or not the sexual assault is promptly reported. This variable tends not to be exploited in NIBR's research, but it's actually a very important variable. I mean, you have the date of the incident, if you look at NIBR's data, and then there's whether or not the incident was reported on the same date that the incident took place. And so they don't tell you the report date, they just tell you whether or not it is. And this is important because if a crime is reported late, it could affect clearance for two reasons. One being the police may not find the victim as credible, and second, there may be a culprit evidence trail. So anyway, pretty important variable. Then also look at my urban-rural classification. NIBR's included like 8 kinds of cities classifications and maybe 4 or so non-MSA classifications. I wanted to make very distinct comparisons. So I picked cities 500,000 and over, cities under 25,000, and non-MSA counties. So non-MSA counties are my indicator of rural. And if you look at the literature on rural policing, you know, over the years, they'll say, well, we studied, you know, the Census Bureau says as a town with 2,500 people or less and away from a city is rural. Well, now the Census Bureau defines rural as not urban. Anything that's not urban is rural. So, okay, how much time do I have? Okay. Oh, great. Okay. All right. I also looked at whether or not the sexual assault was completed versus attempted, and you can see the other variables I looked at. I pretty much exploited what NIBR's had to give in terms of incident, offender, and victim characteristics. Okay. Now, just a few bivariate relations I want to go over with you. If you turn to figure 1, basically the figure confirms that there are a higher rate of assaults by strangers in urban areas, and that smaller locations conversely have a higher rates of reported assaults by intimates and acquaintances. If you turn to table 2, this is very interesting. Non-MSA counties and small cities were more likely to clear rapes by strangers, but less likely to clear rapes by intimates than big cities. However, the former, the small town and rural agencies, have a better record of clearing acquaintance rates, excluding those involving friends, than big cities. So if, you know, you rape by an employer or employee, the owner of a house rapes the babysitter, etc. They have a better record of clearing those.